Now that you know how to show and hide user interface elements, as well as working with timers, we're going to put that together to make a pretty complex app called the Brain Trainer. You may have used apps like this before. Essentially, this Brain Trainer app will create a series of sums for you, so addition sums, to keep your brain in check, and you have to answer as many as you can within 30 seconds. So initially, we've got nothing but this big button, and then when we press the button, we get a timer counting down, a score at the top right, and then, in this case, a fairly simple sum. If we tap it, we get it right and add 1 to our score. If we get it wrong, then it says wrong and obviously doesn't add 1 to our score. We can then keep on going, trying to get more, etc. See how I do. Not great. And then when the timer runs out, you get a summary of your score, and then you get the option to play again, and then it starts all over again. So that's what we're aiming to create. I'm going to give you one tip that I've used a thing called tags to help me work out which button has been pressed, and I recommend you do the same. So as usual, have a Google, see if you can figure out how that'll work for you, or indeed ignore my suggestion completely and do it another way. Very welcome to do that. This is, as I say, a pretty complicated app compared to anything that we've made before. So if you get completely lost, don't worry about it. Just take a break, and then if you like, watch me go through the process of creating it. But I hope it should be a lot of fun. It's definitely a challenge. So best of luck. I'll give you a moment to pause the video now. All right, hope that went well. I'm going to start, of course, by creating a new project. And we'll call it Brain Trainer. Okay. So we're going to start by designing the main layout. So we'll start with the layout for the kind of launch page. So that big button that says go, and then we'll have the layout for the actual quiz questions page after that. Here we go. So let's get rid of our hello world. I'm just going to have a single big button right in the middle of the screen that says go. And I'll call it the start button. Okay, all very nice, but we definitely need much bigger text there. So let's try 80 SP. That looks pretty good. I'm going to increase the padding a bit. So let's try 20 dp, maybe more. Lovely. And I want the background tint to be green. Fantastic. Pretty clear what that button's supposed to do. So when they press the button, we're going to run the start method, which mostly is going to, initially at least, hide that button. And then we'll be able to put all the other elements in place. So let's write our code to do that. So public void start. And it will be called by the button, of course. And then add the view framework. And then we want to hide that initial button. So I'm going to create a global variable for it up there. Lovely. And then we'll find it in the onCreate method. So start button equals, and then we want to cast our view to a button. Find view by ID, r.id.start button. There we go. And then we can just use start button dot set visibility view dot invisible. Okay, just a quick one then to make sure that that's all connected okay. All that should happen, of course, is that that big button should disappear when we tap it. Here we go, tapping the button, and there it goes. Fantastic. So everything fine thus far. Now I'm actually going to update this so that the button is hidden by default, so that we don't have to tap it every time, and that will make it much easier to create our layout as well if we don't have to hide things behind the button, etc. So let's set the visibility to invisible from the off. And then let's add in text view at the top left. Which is going to contain the number of seconds left. So I'm going to initially call that 30 seconds and we'll call it timer text view. And I think we need to make that a little bit bigger. Try 20 SP. Maybe 30. I'm also going to change the background color just to make things a little bit more fun. So we'll make this yellow and add a little bit of padding. Great. Then on the top right, we'll add another label or another text view. So this is going to be top right. And this is going to be the number of points. So initially we're going to have 0 out of 0. And we'll call it points text view. There we go. And again, we'll try 40 SP. No, let's keep it the same size. So 30 SP and then padding of 10 dp and a background of orange. Lovely. And then in the middle here, I'm going to add yet another text view. It's going to be aligned to the top but centered, which is going to have our sum in it. So let's say we'll start with 31 plus 12. And we'll call this the sum text view. And then again, we'll have text size. So we might need to be a little bit smaller. So let's try 25 SP. Yep, I think that looks good. And padding of 15 dp. Okay. I'm also going to make that slightly darker. Text color. So we'll have it just slightly off black. Great. That brings it out a little bit. All good so far. Now we're going to have our grid layout to put our buttons into. So that's going to go underneath all of this. So let's drag in our first button to this grid layout. I'm going to drag it in up there, just as we did before. And then I'm going to go over and do a few bits in the text. So here's our grid layout and here's our button. So I'm going to set the column to 0, the row to 0, because this is going to be my top left button. I'm going to set the column weight to 1 and the row weight to 1 as well. And then I'm going to set the layout gravity to fill. And now this is the new bit. I'm going to set a tag and this is what I'm going to use to refer to my buttons. So this one's going to be the first one, so it's going to have a tag of 0. So we'll see how to use that in a bit, but there we go. So my text for the moment is just going to be a number. So number 3, the text size needs to be quite a bit bigger. So let's go for 20 SP. I think we can actually go a lot bigger than that. Oop, too big. I meant 50. Okay, even larger than that, maybe 80. Okay, that should do. And then I'm just going to change the background color because we want nice colorful boxes here. So we'll make this one blue. Lovely. And finally, the on click is going to be, if I can find it, choose answer. Okay, so now I've set up everything I need. I'm going to copy and paste the XML for that button. Four times to get all 4 buttons, and then just update it as I go. So this one's going to be column 1, row 0. The tag is going to be 1, and I'll choose the background color separately. This one's going to be column 0, row 1. Tag is going to be 2. And then finally, this one's going to have a column 1, row 1, tag 3. There we go. Okay, so I'm liking all of those. We do have some IDs overlapping. We don't want 2 buttons with the same ID, so let's just update those to 0, 1, 2, and 3. Great, then we just need to create different background colors for these buttons. If I can find it. Be very careful not to click on the slider there. So we'll go for a nice green one. We'll make this one a kind of pinky purple. And then bottom right, we'll make turquoise. Okay. Lovely. Looks a bit like it was designed by a 4-year-old, but that's as far as my design skills go, I'm afraid. It's at least quite pretty and hopefully quite fun. The last thing I'm going to do is just change the grid layout to change the height to wrap the content. So that makes the buttons quite a bit smaller, but gives us room to put a correct or incorrect label underneath. So let's bring in another text view. We want it to be centered. There we go. And again, we'll change the text size to about 50 SP, maybe slightly smaller. And I'll just put correct so that we know how it's going to look. And result text view. There we go. Only thing I'd like there, I think, is I'd like a little bit of a margin at the top of my grid layout to move it down slightly. Let's just try that. There we go. Great. Now I want to move correct down slightly. There we go. All right, I'm happy with the layout. Let's start getting some interaction. So we'll go back over to main-activity.java. And here we've hidden the start button. I'm not going to worry about showing everything else at the moment because we're just going to show it by default. And then right at the end, we'll add back in the start button. So we'll actually put our code in the onCreate method. And we'll start by creating our sum. So we're going to have two letters that represent the two numbers that we're going to add together. So if, for example, it was going to be 7 plus 8, then we'd do something like that. Of course, we don't want 7 and 8 every time, so we're going to need a random number generator. And we do that in Java, as we've seen before, using rand. So first we'll create our random rand, which is going to be a new random. Okay, and then we want a random, and we'll generate an integer. And I'm going to generate random numbers between 0 and 20. So that means I need to give it a value of 21, and that will generate a random number between 0 and 20. And we'll do the same thing for B. You can, of course, have different specifications for your random numbers. You might not want them to be too small, or you might want them to be a bit bigger, or whatever you like. It doesn't really matter. So the first thing we're going to do with these random numbers is update the value of this label so that the user can see the sum. So this was sum text view. So let's access that first. It's a text view. We'll call it sum text view. We'll need to cast it to a text view, and then we'll find it by its ID using r.id.sum text view. Okay, and then we're just going to update sum text view, and we're going to set the text to integer dot toString a, and then plus, and then a plus inside the string. So this plus is not concatenating anything, it's just the plus that appears in the string, and then we add to that integer dot toString b. All right, so let's just run that and make sure that everything that we've done so far looks okay. There we go. So the layout looks nice. We've got our sum there, which is a couple of random numbers. Looks good to me. And everything else is working. Now we're going to generate our answers. So of course, 3 of them have to be wrong and 1 of them has to be right. And the correct one has to appear in a random location within our buttons. So let's have an answers array list. And these are going to be integers. And and we'll call them answers. I'm defining them up here because we're probably going to need them in a number of different methods. So now we need to generate several random numbers. We need to generate the 3 incorrect answers and also the location of the correct answer. So let's just define an integer which is going to be location of correct answer. And then we'll let location of the correct answer be another random number. This time we want it to be between 0 and 3. So we use rand.nextInt and then 4. So this will give us 0, 1, 2, or 3, which makes sense. Then I'm going to do a little loop which will loop through each of the values for the buttons. So through 4 of them, and assign them either the correct answer or a randomly generated incorrect answer. So I'll use a for loop. I is going to start off being 0. We're going to keep going as long as I is less than 4. And we want to increment I by 1 each time. And then we want to check if I is equal to the location of the correct answer. Then we want to set answers dot add and then the correct answer, which is A plus B. And if it's not, then we want to add generated incorrect answer. So we'll use rand.nextInt. And if we're going from 0 to 20 for each of the 2 numbers that we're adding together, then going from 0 to 40 seems sensible for the total. Now there's a potential issue here. It's possible that we could generate a random number which happens to be equal to the answer, and then if the user tapped that, then they would get it wrong. So to get around that, what we'll do is create an integer called incorrect answer, and then here we'll generate an incorrect answer in just the same way as we did before, and we'll have a little while loop which will keep on going as long as the incorrect answer is equal to the correct answer, which is A plus B. And if that's true, then we'll generate another incorrect answer. So that's quite a neat way of ensuring that we don't have an incorrect answer that happens to be the same as the correct answer. So this loop will just keep on going until an incorrect answer is generated which is different to the correct answer. So probably that won't take more than once or twice. It would be very unlikely if it did, but it could keep on going for a long time if by sheer chance we kept on getting values which were the same as the correct value. Okay. So now we'll add incorrect answer to our array list. So once this loop is completed, we should have 4 values in our array list, of which 1 will be the correct answer, and that will be at the location of the correct answer, which is again generated randomly. Then it's a matter of updating the buttons with their matching values. It's slightly inelegant what I'm going to do, but it'll get the job done, and for 4 buttons, it's probably the simplest way to do it. I'm just going to update each of them using their IDs. So we'll create our buttons here, and button 0 is going to be a button, find view by ID, and r.id.button0. And then to keep things moving swiftly, I'll just copy and paste that. 1, 2, 3. And then we can just update each of those manually. So button0.set text, and that text is going to be integer.toString, and then the appropriate answer for that button, which is going to be answers.get, and then 0. So that will set the text of the first button to the first answer, and then second button to the second answer, etc. And just before we run that, we do actually need to set up our answers array list to be a new array list of integers. Otherwise, it's not initialized and we can't actually use it. Okay. We should, with any luck, find that we now get a set of 4 numbers, of which 1 is the correct answer. So 12 plus 15 is 27, and that answer is there. The other answers are incorrect. Fantastic. I just want to test that again, just to be absolutely sure. So next time we should get a different random number, and it should be in a different location. So 6 plus 4 is 10, which is there, and we get some other incorrect answers. Brilliant. So now let's add the code for the user to set their correct answer. We call that chooseAnswer. So I'm going to add that here. So public void chooseAnswer, and that's going to be called by one of the buttons, which of course is a view. And now this is the clever bit, using the tag that will allow us to tell which of the buttons has been tapped. So for now, just to convince us that the tags are working, let's use log.i and then tag, and then to get the tag of the button that was tapped, we use view to get the button, and then get tag. And then we do just need to cast that to a string, which it will do that for us. Okay, so that should print to the logs 0, 1, 2, or 3, depending on which button we've tapped. So let's just check that that's true, and then of course we can check that against location of the correct answer to find out whether or not the user has got it right. Here we go. So, yep, that was a 0. 1, 2, 3. Brilliant. So we're getting the tag. So now we need to take the tag and compare it to the location of the correct answer. So we'll do that by converting both of them to strings. So we'll use view.getTag.toString, and then we're going to compare that. And remember, when we're comparing two strings, we use equals. And then the other string is going to be location of correct answer, which is of course an integer. So we're going to need to convert that to a string as well. So we'll use integer.toString and then location of correct answer. So if those match, then we'll log for now correct. Don't really mind about the spelling there. Just want to check to see if this works. Okay, so 6 plus 0 is 6. So with any luck, that displayed correct. Fantastic. And just to be sure, if I do it again, we get correct. If I do the others, nothing happens. Brilliant. So now we need to think about what we're going to do when the user gets a correct answer. We're going to need to add 1 to their score and then generate a new question. So generating a new question, we're going to do that regardless of whether they've got it correct. So really the only thing we need to do to get it right is add 1 to their score. So let's have a score variable, which we'll initially set to 0. And then if they get it right, score plus plus. And come to think of it, we also do need to update the label, so the result text view label, to say correct, even though it already does. So let's have a text view, we'll call it result text view. We'll find it down here. So it's going to be a text view. We're going to find it by its ID and r.id.result text view. Should be almost second nature doing that now. So now we can take result text view and set the text to correct. And then if they get it wrong, then we don't increase the score, but we'll set the text of the result text view to wrong. Okay, and then let's just go back and set the contents of that text view to 0 or to empty to start with. And now we should generate that label, or the label content at least, when we get it right or wrong. So 2 plus 14, 16 is correct. Fantastic. Just to make sure, let's make sure that the wrong label appears when necessary as well. 11 plus 1 is not 11, that's wrong. Brilliant. So we're looking good. Let's then keep track of this score. So we need to display that to the user, and we're doing that up here in our points text view. So as well as the score, we need to know the number of questions, which again is going to be 0. And here we're going to increment the number of questions either way. Whether they get it right or wrong, they still get a new question. So now we need to find the, what was it called? Points text view. So text view, points text view. Add it down here. Points text view is a text view. Finding it by its ID, r.id.points text view. Lovely. So now we can set the points text view text to, and we want a slash in the middle, and we want the score as a string. And then the slash, and then we want to convert the number of questions to a string. So let's just quickly check that. We should now find that once we've answered a question, it updates the score correctly for us. So 7, 1 out of 1. Brilliant. This is looking good. So now we need to generate a new question each time a question is answered. So if you've been paying attention, you're probably thinking that we need to create a new method, generate question. Because we're going to want to call that at various points. So here's our code, remember, that generates the question. So I'm just going to cut all of that there, generate a question at the beginning, and then put that code in there. We are going to need those buttons defined elsewhere. So let's just get rid of the definitions there. And define them up here. So 1, 2, and 3. And some text view as well. So we'll copy that definition. We don't want to define it down there. Instead, we want to define it up here. Okay, worth just checking that our code still works. So we're generating a random number that's only within our method here, so that's fine. That's going to update the question. We randomly generate the location of the correct answer, then we generate the incorrect answers, then we display those on the buttons. That looks promising. So we're going to want to generate a new question as soon as the user has answered the previous question. All right. So now if we've done everything correctly, we should find that we have a string of questions being asked, and indeed that the app keeps track of the score as well as we go along. So 12 plus 11, 23. So 1 out of 1, correct, and a new question. This is looking good. 19 plus 14. Now the correct answer is 33, which is not here. Can you think what's causing that error? In fact, I'll give you a moment to think about it because it's quite a good one. The answer is our array list is getting added to every time we generate some new answers. So what we need to do is remove the contents of our answers array list each time we generate some new ones. And we can do that using answers.clear. There we go. With any luck, that should fix the problem and will genuinely generate new answers that we can access and add to our buttons. Okay, 0 plus 0 is 0. 13 plus 2 is 15. 7 plus 16 is 23. Excellent. Let's just get one wrong. This is good. Yep, 5 plus 8 is 13. Brilliant, and that score is doing a great job of keeping track. Brilliant. So our basic core system is now working. We just need to add a few tweaks. Mostly we need to get this timer working. So let's do that over in onCreate. We'll need a new countdown timer. And we want it to last for 30 seconds, so 30,000. And we want it to tick every second, so every 1,000. And I'm going to ask it to generate the methods for us. Lovely. And we need a semicolon there. And actually, I just remember that we need to make it very slightly longer. Otherwise, we will get that weird effect that we saw in the egg timer app. So all we actually have to do each time the timer ticks down is update the label over here, the timer text view. So let's do that. I'm going to create it up here. So text view, timer, text view, and then we'll find it here. Cast it to text view, find view by ID, r.id.timer text view. There we go. So we just need to set timer text view and then we're going to take our milliseconds until finished, divide that by 1000, and then convert that to a string. So we'll use string dot value of there we go. And then just to check here, I'm going to put the final results that the user got in the same place as the results. So in result text view. So let's just update that here. So result text view dot set text. For now, we'll just put done. And so that we don't have to watch it every time, let's change it to 3 seconds. And then we just need to tell that to start. And actually, don't want to forget to add the S after the value, so that they know that there's so many seconds remaining. Okay, let's take a look. Here we go. So 2 seconds. Excellent. I hope you saw that. Once again, I think we do need to update the timer on finish. So timer text view, set text to 0 seconds on finish. And then we'll change the text to your score. And this is really just going to mirror what it already says in the top right anyway. So let's just copy that and pop it there. You could, if you wanted, add a little well done, or could do better if you want to decide what makes a good score and what doesn't, but I'll leave that to you to add. The final bit, in this part at least for me, is going to be to add a play again button. So I'm going to add that just underneath my result text view. So text will be play again. ID will be play again button. And then the only thing I'm going to edit here is the on click. Call that play again. So let's write the code for that. So as usual, public void play again. It's going to be called by a view. So what do we need to do? We need to set the score back to 0. We need to set the number of questions back to 0. We need to update the timer. So, in fact, what I think I'll do is just call the play again method when the app starts and then put the timer in there. And then we just want to reset the text of the timer text view. So set text to 30 seconds. And we want to set the text of the points text view to be 0 out of 0. And we want to set the result text view text to nothing. We also want to hide the play again button because we don't want that to be there while they're actually playing. So let's add that in. So button, play again button. And then down here, we'll add our play again button. Find view by ID and then r.id.playAgain button. So we want that to show when the timer has finished. So here, so play again button dot set visibility view dot visible, and then we want to hide it when we've started to play again. So play again button dot set visibility view dot invisible. And finally, we want the initial visibility to be invisible because we don't want the play again button to appear at the beginning of the game. Right, I think we've done everything there. We may well have forgotten one or two things, but let's take a look and see how it displays. I have found that we don't necessarily see all of the values of this timer because my machine is chugging a little bit here. Oh, I think I may have missed. You can see here I haven't got any arguments. I should have some arguments. Not a problem. That's quite an interesting error actually. It's not that I forgot to put view in my method definition. It's that down here we're calling play again and we need to send a view. So here it really doesn't matter what the view is, but it just needs a view. So what we'll do is we'll send the play again button view. Given that that's what launches it later on anyway, it seems to make sense, but really any view will do here. Here we go then. So we've got no button there. That's good. Okay, your score 0. Fantastic. Play again. So setting back to 0 again. This is looking good. The one thing it's not doing is generating a new question. That's a shame. Okay, but not a problem. Very easy to fix. We just need to add that to our play again method here. So generate question, and in fact that means that we can get rid of it from our onCreate method, because it's already going to be called when we call the play again method here. Okay, I feel we're pretty close now. Our last step, of course, will be setting up the go button. So score 0, that's fine. Excellent. So now we've got a new question. See if I can answer it in time. And we do get 1 out of 1. Fantastic. So our basic brain trainer is now completely up and running. We just need to set it up so that that initial go button is displayed correctly. Now what I'm going to do here, rather than manually hide and show all of these elements, I'm going to create a second relative layout, which I'm then going to drag into the existing relative layout there. And then everything except the start button, I'm going to select and then drag it into that new relative layout. And then that relative layout is going to be invisible to start with. So everything there is going to be invisible, and the start button is now going to be visible. There we go. And then when the start button is pressed, it sets its own visibility to invisible. We then need an ID to refer to this new relative layout. I'll call it game relative layout. And then let's just add that in. So it's a relative layout called game relative layout. We'll find it down here. It's a relative layout. Find view by ID. r.id.game relative layout. And then we can make that visible by setting the visibility to relative layout dot visible. There we go. And it actually doesn't matter whether we leave the play again method call in onCreate, but I think it makes a little bit more sense, logically at least, to call it when the start button, and in fact yes, we will need that because the timer we want to start as soon as the start button is pressed and not before. Okay, I'm feeling fairly confident about this, so I'm going to update the timer to go back to 30 seconds to start with, and then let's take a look. So just to recap there, while it's compiling, I've used a relative layout there more as a logical collection of objects rather than an actual way of laying them out as such. And that's a perfectly valid use of a layout or grouping if you want to do it that way. So here we go. Go. Time is looking good. 19 plus 3, 22. Ah, correct is in the wrong place. Right. So we've lost something there. Let's just jump back quickly. So yeah, we do have a problem with our result text view. Let's just quickly make all of that visible again. It'll be a little bit easier. I think what's happened is I set the layout for result text view to depend on that go button, which was a bad idea anyway, but it completely broke when I took the go button out of that relative layout. So it's probably easiest to fix this using the text. So where is our result text view? There it is. Yep, you can see. So it's currently below the start button, which is not what we want. We want it to be below the grid layout, which I don't think actually has an ID. So let's just set an ID to the grid layout. And that's just can be grid layout will be fine there. And then let's set this to be 40 SP below the grid layout. Might make it a little bit too low down. Hard to tell because it doesn't currently have any text. Let's check it out. It's not hugely significant one way or the other, but it should appear down there. I suspect we may need to change the layout slightly there, but we'll see. Oh yes, of course, we need to make that invisible, but let's just use this to check the location of the result label. Yeah, I think I'd like to give that a bit of a top margin to move it slightly further down. And while we're doing that, we can make our relative layout invisible as well. So let's just change result text view to have a margin at the top. Try 15 dps. It's looking a little high up actually. 25. Try that out. And then let's just set the game relative layout to invisible. And with any luck for the final time, we'll give it a run. Okay, so let's tap go. 6 plus 1 is 7. That looks much better. 0 plus 20 is 20, 19, 17, 16. Ooh, 25. I'll just get one wrong. On purpose, obviously. 14 plus 17, 31. 6 plus 16, 22, 18, 22. 12 plus 3, ooh, 15. 12 plus 8, 20. There we go. Your score 12 out of 13. Fantastic. So that's all working great. And then play again. Resets everything back to 0 again. And 14 plus 2 is 16, etc. Brilliant. So we now have our completely working brain trainer. I hope you did manage to do a fair bit of that yourself, but there was quite a lot of complex code in here. And you can see we've actually written quite a lot of code all in all, which hopefully starts to convince you of the importance of keeping your code very well organized, keeping your variable names very clear, etc., etc. Because trying to maintain something like this is not simple. If you particularly enjoyed that one, there's very easy ways to take it further. You could make it so that instead of just addition signs, we have subtraction as well, multiplication, division. So they could be randomly put in there, or the user could have the option to choose addition or subtraction or multiplication or division as their sums for that day. You could have a high score, which is updated each time the user obviously outperforms themselves. And you could, of course, make it look even more beautiful and colourful than it does already. That wouldn't be too difficult a challenge. But I hope you've enjoyed making what was probably our biggest and most complex app so far. We're now going to move away from timers at last, and we're going to start looking at how we can download web content and use that directly in our apps.